One of my favorite feelings is climbing into my bed when it has freshly laundered sheets. I didn't think it could get much better until I tried Alisha sheets. Alisha is the original for luxuriously soft and sustainable bedding, bath, and apparel made from bamboo viscose. Alisha's commitment to sustainability starts at the source, right out of the ground, and it extends all the way to your home and back again. It's a comfy way to save the planet. I love my Alisha sheets, and when I first got them, I couldn't believe how cute the reusable box they came in was and how amazingly soft the sheets were. Not only are bamboo sheets twice as soft as cotton, but they also stay 3 degrees cooler than non-bamboo sheets. Whether you're buying a gift or treating yourself, you can't go wrong with luxurious, super soft, and sustainable Alisha sheets. Alisha is giving our listeners 25% off their order by using code RAIN. This code doesn't last forever, so hurry and head to CARILOHA.com and use code RAIN to receive 25% off your order. I recently started adding the good stuff to my morning routine so that I could have more energy and healthier skin and hair. The good stuff is a superfood powder that can be added to any beverage. Whether you like a morning coffee, tea, or protein shake, 1 scoop of the good stuff powder enhances your drink, helps to promote focus, fights inflammation, and if I might say so, it tastes pretty great. I love a good superfood, and it's typically the first thing I put in my body each day. The good stuff is different from all the rest. When I opened the package, it was like fall finally arrived. I couldn't tell if it smelled more like apple cider or cinnamon coffee cake, but either way, it smelled great. 4 wellness products are made with only the good stuff and none of the bad, like artificial ingredients, creamers, or sweeteners. They're specifically designed to be easy to integrate into everyday routines because 4 Wellness believes feeling great shouldn't come at the expense of taste or convenience. You can get 20% off your order, plus free shipping and a free starter kit worth over $30 for a limited time when you visit 4wellness.com/podcast. That's FORWELLNESS.com/podcast and enter code RAIN at checkout. This is 4 Wellness's best offer right now, so don't wait. Order today. They're so sure that you'll see the benefits of adding the good stuff to your coffee that they back every purchase with a 60-day money-back guarantee. If you're not completely satisfied, you can return it for a full refund.
This episode originally aired on our Patreon. We'll be back soon with brand new episodes. Thank you for your understanding. This is Murder in the Rain, where each week Emily Rowney, Alisha Holland, and Josh McCullough tell true crime stories of the Pacific Northwest. Murder in the Rain contains graphic content. Listener discretion is advised.
Some of the stories that creep me out the most are the ones about finding out someone has been living in your house, going completely undetected by the family that lives there. From hidden rooms, pathways in the halls, crawl spaces, or nests in the attic, I find it utterly disturbing. My case today is the kind that will likely give me nightmares tonight. Honestly, it will give any parent or guardian nightmares. We're going to talk about a grown man who secretly lived in the bedroom of a 12-year-old girl. On March 11th, 2020, a man named Zacharias Adrian Cavazos was arrested for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl repeatedly over an entire month. Cavazos spent that month living in the young girl's bedroom right up until the police handcuffed him right there in the very room. Cavazos, who lives in Washington, met the 12-year-old girl through social media using Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat to regularly message her and convince her to meet him in person. He suggested they meet at the Wild Horse Resort and Casino in February. From there, he went to her home on the Umatilla Indian Reservation, where he hid in her room with her. Over the course of 2 weeks, he sexually assaulted her repeatedly. When he wasn't abusing her, he took the slats out from underneath her bed so he could hide within a cavity in the box spring. On February 25th, the girl's grandfather, who is her guardian, discovered the man in her room, so he kicks him out. What Grandpa didn't know was that the man had multiple hiding spots in her room, and once he was kicked off the property, he slipped back in and resumed his abuse for another 2 weeks. Cavazos' lawyer argued that Cavazos thought that he was engaging in a, quote, appropriate romantic relationship with the girl in her bedroom. Thankfully, the judge shut that down, saying basically that in no world is an interaction between a 20-year-old and a 12-year-old appropriate or romantic. She said, quote, that's not remotely possible since the victim can't legally provide consent. And obviously I agree, it's rape, plain and simple. Since the assault took place on the Indian reservation, it will be tried in federal court. So he's being charged with sexual abuse of a minor, and he is going to the U.S. District Court in Portland. Now, Cavazos is currently released until he goes to trial. The judge ordered that he is not allowed to make contact with the victim. He cannot go to the reservation or the casino. His phone and computer are monitored, and he's currently confined to a clean and sober home in Aloha, Oregon, where he is being monitored by GPS as well as adhering to a curfew. Now, there are some things I wanted to talk about with this case just because I don't know if everyone is familiar with how reservations work and how the federal government intervenes sometimes. So I wanted to address this. I know we talked about it a little in one of our previous episodes, but I'm going to use a term called Indian country. This is something recognized by our federal government, and it is a law. Now, what this means is tribal land within a reservation is Indian country. It also incorporates towns and other properties that are non-Indian owned, but are within the reservation boundaries. So in Oregon, we have 1.4% of our land falling into what we deem Indian country. In the 2009 census, 1.6% of Oregonians identified as American Indian or Alaska Native. Now, let's remember, these groups are significantly underreported. In fact, right now in Oregon, there's a marketing campaign for the census directed at those populations. Their hopes are to make folks understand that reporting how you identify will help your community get more grants and other benefits. But I can see why people might not want to because of the history between being Native American in the U.S. and the government. So I totally understand. I feel like we should invest more in education around the census because even people I know don't want to report. And I'm like, you realize how much goes off of that census. Yeah. I mean, my work uses that data and it's very private. I have a colleague who used to work at the census and she, like, nobody has passwords to anything. Right. You don't know jack.
Yeah, it really is to make sure you have the right amount of representatives in Washington and you have the right, federal budget and local budget and support services for what you need and how many kids do we have? So how many schools do we need? I mean, it covers everything. And especially for Native Americans because, the murder rate, the domestic violence rate, all of that, and the, sexual assault rate is so just astronomically higher percentage. Yeah. So you report that and then maybe you get more, in-house security type stuff so that it's not dealing with federal government, not dealing with the police. You can have local police.
It's a hurdle in a lot of minority populations. This is a problem. Yeah. So I'm hoping that, getting the word out there helps.
Especially now.
Now, census is open. Like everyone go online and do it.
If you are a family of immigrants, even if you are a citizen, but maybe your family is immigrants, right now in this climate, how likely are you to report? Yeah, I mean, really,
because you're worried if I report, they're going to know exactly where I live, who they're going to take my family members. It's a very scary time.
And it's easy to say that's not what it's for, but unfortunately, you really have no idea.
It depends on who's in power, I think, but we won't go down that too far. So getting back to tribal law and how it interacts with the government, it is a little tricky. So I just wanted to break it down really easy for our listeners. And I know we talked about this before, but it doesn't hurt to bring it up again. So I'm going to talk about a few scenarios. All of these reference major crimes in Indian country, both federal terms. Major crimes, Indian country. This info comes from tribalinstitute.org. When a perpetrator is Indian and a victim is Indian, this goes to tribal jurisdiction. Federal government has nothing to do with it. They handle it within their own jurisdiction. When the perpetrator is non-Indian and the victim is non-Indian and it happens on tribal land, this goes to the state court. When a perpetrator is Indian and the victim is non-Indian, this can be interfered with by the federal government, or it can be handled on tribal land. I don't exactly know how that works, but I have a feeling the federal government will intervene if they don't agree with how it's handled.
Oh,
I think.
right.
I'm not sure.
That would make sense.
Now, when the perpetrator is non-Indian and the victim is Indian, this is a federal case. So
and that was the
this
scenario?
Is our scenario.
Okay.
The girl is Native American and the man is not.
Okay.
So that's why that's why it's being handled there, which I think is good and will hopefully get some attention on this case because as we know, these girls are in such a susceptible, risky area. I mean, it's just so sad. So I wanted to pull up some of these stats that we've talked about many times. And of course, I am me, so I had to bring in the stats, but I think it's a great...
I actually made a PowerPoint. You guys can't see it, but it looks good.
I think it's a good way to illustrate like how pervasive something is. Just when you see a number is like hard fact to some people. It really outlines this problem. So saying that, 56.1% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced sexual violence. 55.5% have experienced physical violence from their intimate partner. 48.8% have experienced stalking. And 66.4% have experienced psychological aggression by their intimate partner. So I think everyone should read the paper. We're going to post it with the audio so you can see these stats, but it breaks it down in comparison to white women. It also looks at male Native American and both populations when compared to white people, it's about double the risk. It's a very, very scary. So not only is it already likely that a Native American woman's going to have some sort of physical violence, as she gets older, it only increases. So this 12-year-old, I mean, hopefully this is dealt with and she gets the help she needs, but this just makes her an even riskier situation for down the line. It's very scary. So I really would suggest reading this paper, sharing it with everyone. It's from 2016 and it is called, I didn't write it down, U.S. Department of Justice, Violence Against American Indian and Alaska Native Women. So we'll post that for you so you can see all of those stats.
And I think it feels, those numbers feel overwhelming and insurmountable. But I think if you break it down, it really comes down to generational trauma and, an complete uprooting of your culture and then not having support systems and inherent racism in the authoritative people that support you. And it's like, though you can't change the history, but you can work like there should be such an abundance of treatment available to have people have someone to talk to. And
there are some good programs, but it's not.
And
it's
just like law enforcement, what does that need to look like? Are you making sure that the people that are in law enforcement that support those communities are part of that community and not just someone,
I am a big proponent of that. And I know a lot of colleges purposely recruit from the reservation because they want people from there to be involved in actual government positions. So you look at something like NAGPRA, which as an archaeologist, you have to deal with a lot because there are rights that Native Americans have with human remains. And so we would go and recruit off of the reservation to say, come to be an anthropology student. There's lots of scholarships. I think having more Native American people in government would help because transparency is a problem. We're not talking about these problems in white society. Who's going to learn about them? So one thing I wanted to bring up, which I know you guys make fun of me for being on TikTok, there's actually a movement of Native millennials and younger, Gen Z.
Yeah.
They're all on there and advocating for Native Americans. It's so cool. So there'll be
I really feel like you're seeing, I know I'm seeing it more on social media.
Yeah, it's cool.
The hashtag MMIW and all of that.
There's a lot. I mean, they'll be in like ceremony dress just to get people like interested in another culture. The red paint across the mouth that we've talked about.
Even just the other day, Portugal the Man, using their platform, the band, using their platform. They did a whole thing on it the other day on their social media. So it's that easy of just
becoming more relevant
awareness.
to
and then you go,
people.
well, why are people talking about it? And then you look into it. Next thing you know, it's, that's not right. How do we fix it.
Mm-hmm. So I think more awareness and just getting online with it is important. But I also think we've got to get more of these kids on reservations growing up and going to college and getting out into, white person society.
Yeah, making sure that those opportunities are accessible
Absolutely.
to them.
And it just makes it, I think, better for everyone. But
Mhm.
what I love about it being on TikTok is like there's this whole generation of people glued to those phones.
Mhm.
So this gets them actually interested in learning about other people.
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
Had a question about the case.
Yes.
Did it say how they discovered him the second time?
I think the grandfather found him again.
Just found him in the
But
room.
the creepiest is him in that box spring, I tell you. I don't know much
and it's
about
so
the family.
awful. I mean, not to like end on a sour note, but just to know that 1 month of that has completely changed the trajectory of her life.
Yeah, and
hopefully it can be intervened.
Go back into that
better.
Go back in that mindset of being a young girl and getting attention from a boy you think is cute. Like they're just such a susceptible little person.
Well, and you don't even think of it that way. I mean, it's one thing to be like, oh, he's paying attention. That's cool. And who knows why she's living just with grandpa. It's like there could be some inherent stuff where you're seeking out that attention.
There's probably a lot to the story.
And so you get that. And it's creepy. It's gross. It's awful.
Trying to say that he has some mental capacity issues and like, just don't. No, I'm pretty sure he knew it was wrong. I mean, we'll see. We'll go to court.
That takes like some cunning forethought
and that's
be
grooming.
Like, okay, I'm gonna undo. Oh yeah,
when you're online, that is grooming. She told you she was 12. That's when you say, oh, bye.
Yeah.
No, he wanted that to happen. So I think he needs to be punished severely.
The other day, after 14 and a half months, I had my first meal in a restaurant. I thought I would be a lot more anxious than I was, but in trusting in the science, and maybe against my better judgment, other people, it was a wonderful experience that nearly had me in tears. Shout out to Sweet Betty's in Gresham, which just changed locations and is a fun, inclusive, and delicious place to go, so please check them out. After having a delicious breakfast, it felt like everything normal was going to be possible again. Besides going to the movies, there is one place that I hope to go to later this year that I have missed desperately during all of this quarantine lockdown: Disneyland. I know, they're a big evil corporation, yada yada, but Disneyland holds the same place in my heart as, say, going to your grandma's. Usually because we went to my grandma's when we went to Disneyland.
I was going to say, even I've gone to your grandma's going to Disneyland. Your grandma and I had a fabulous day by the pool.
You sure did. I would say I missed out, but I was also in Disneyland and not.
Well, I was pregnant and puking my guts out, so I preferred my day.
Disneyland, of course, is part of the Disney catalog. They're the makers of our favorite parks, favorite movies, favorite TV shows, and a mediocre streaming app. One of the most iconic shows in Disney history had a catchy theme song that you might remember. It went a little something like this.
Mickey Mouse, la-la-la, Mickey Mouse, la-la-la. Forever let us hold our banner high, 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 high.
If you are gorgeous youngsters like Emily and I, when you hear the Mickey Mouse Club, you probably think about the churning machine of talent that was the 90s version of the original Mickey Mouse Club, which introduced us to such stars as Ryan Gosling, Kerry Russell, J.C. Chasez, Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake, and Britney Spears. Now, technically, those were part of the all-new Mickey Mouse Club years, and decades before we were introduced to the stars that we'd still be partying to in the bathroom when we get ready to go out, the Mickey Mouse Club premiered on ABC back in 1955.
Did it really?
Mm-hmm. And that was just a few months after the Disneyland park had opened in California.
I didn't know that.
Well, now I do. Fun fact, the Mickey Mouse Club show came from real clubs that had been around since 1929. According to D23.com, there would be a fan club meeting at theaters where they would watch Mickey cartoons, they had bands perform, and even had elected officials. With over 1 million members, it was no surprise that the club became a show. And it was a lot of show, an hour every weekday. Episodes consisted of musical numbers, skits, special guests, and more, all hosted by the young Mouseketeers. The more famous of them being Annette Funicello and Bobby Burgess. Another cast member was an adorable, big-smiled 12-year-old boy named Dennis Day. Dennis had started his acting career when he was 6 and scored big when he landed the gig as a Mouseketeer. He was part of the cast for 2 seasons, even though he was pretty open and honest as a child and adult about his lack of singing ability. Regardless, Dennis's tap-dancing, banjo-playing, show business savvy and persistence mattered more in the club than his tone deafness. After 2 seasons with Mickey, Dennis set out to do things as he always did, outside the box. As he grew up, he continued to work in show business and was drawn to the counterculture of the 60s and 70s. He worked at a theater in New York, he taught drama and dancing in LA, he directed musicals, he was a producer, and wrote a dance manual. For nearly 20 years, Dennis was the musical director for the California Renaissance Fairs and Dickens Christmas Fair. The safe and welcoming communities Dennis worked in during those times were even more important to him as an out gay man. As only a handful of known celebrities were out at the time, Dennis seemed to effortlessly live the life he wanted without fear of repercussions. Dennis wasn't bitter towards Disney, although the experience did change the trajectory of his life twice. Once in '68 and again in 1980, he appeared on Disney specials celebrating Mickey's 40th birthday and a Mouseketeer reunion show, respectively. Although he did say that he struggled with the fame he had when talking to Rolling Stone in 1971, saying, "I have to say I owe a lot to the experience. My whole life has been influenced by it. But now that it's too late, I know I should never have been in television. I don't know what else I should have done. Maybe grown up with my family like a kid."
That's sad.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. He's not like mad about having done it or like, oh God, Disney.
Kind of misses what he could have had.
Yeah, he realizes like, oh, as a child, I shouldn't have been trying to be a performer. It was at one of the festivals Dennis was working where he met the nearly 12-year-older Henry Ernie Caswell. He had just as interesting a resume as Dennis. He was a performer manager, he was a priest with the Christ Catholic Church, and he spoke 5 languages.
Wow.
I know, I can barely get through English. After spending the rest of the 70s in California, the couple made their way to Southern Oregon. Not only was it cheaper, they actually ended up in Ashland, home of the annual Shakespeare Festival. After a few years there, they headed northwest to Phoenix, Oregon, which is about halfway between Ashland and Medford. Phoenix is a small place, only about 5,000 residents, and a lot of outdoor activities, because there just isn't much else there. Dennis ended up working at a Harry and David packaging plant, which is a fancy store you go to when you need to take a housewarming jelly to a coworker's party.
Or a Mother's Day gift.
Yes.
You're welcome, Mother.
He must have been inspired by Harry and David because he and Ernie eventually started making and selling their own chutneys, wine jellies, and jams. They lived a happy, simple life, going to rummage sales, Ernie performing in the local gay men's choir. Okay, simple, yes, but not boring.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
That's surprising they have a gay men's choir there. I would imagine the makeup of that location isn't...
Yeah. They didn't say it was specifically in Phoenix, so I'm thinking maybe he might have gone to Medford or Ashland or something that was maybe more conducive to that.
Yeah, no offense to the area, but it's definitely not as varied of people as you are the northern.
I think a lot of people don't know that outside of the I-5 corridor, which is basically Eugene, Corvallis, Salem, and Portland, Oregon is a very red state.
Yeah.
It just happens to have way more population in those cities, which happens to all be blue. So yeah, you get out of Portland and it gets, my neighbor across the street has a Trump flag, which is why I bought a big non-Trump flag. Because I'm
neighbor
petty.
wars.
Flag wars. Look out.
New show coming to TLC.
Yeah, I was surprised that there was a gay men's choir as well. They were passionate about working on progressive political campaigns and, of course, going to Hometown Buffet in their loudest outfits.
Yeah, girl. I would have been friends with them.
Oh, absolutely. So some of their attire that they would wear would be like Ernie had a big purple velvet fedora that had leopard print around.
I can picture it in my mind.
Or they'd wear like really bright jackets, or it really sounded like they were it wasn't that scary idea of that community.
They
where
were
it's
just
like,
fun.
Yeah, it was like everyone loved them. They were
Right.
just those guys, and they're loud, and it's great. Then in 2013, after decades together, the couple married. Dennis saying he never thought it would happen, that he had always cried at weddings, but never thought he would be able to cry at his own. But time was passing and their age was catching up, especially for Ernie. He was older and was dealing with memory and other health issues. As time went on, Dennis was unable to keep up with the caregiving of his beloved husband. In just a couple of years, there were nearly 30 calls to 911 for help.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
What was the age difference between the two?
12 years. So
Okay.
Ernie was in his 70s at the time. On top of the care Ernie needed, Dennis needed help maintaining the home. Their purple home was starting to fall apart inside and out. They weren't keeping up with regular repairs. Their animals were kept inside for bathrooming. And
Ooh.
yeah, in addition, they were relying on Meals on Wheels just for their food. Eventually, Ernie went to the hospital, and due to his condition and Dennis's inability to care for him, he was moved to an assisted living facility. 2 days after Ernie's admittance to the facility on July 15th, 2018, Dennis went to visit his friend Kirk Peterson. Kirk had introduced Dennis and Ernie to his handyman, Daniel Bruda. Years prior, Kirk had hired Daniel as a handyman to help him around his house. When it became clear to their friend that Dennis and Ernie needed help with housework, Kirk offered the use of his handyman. And as a show of friendship, Kirk even paid Daniel $100 a day for working at their house. Isn't that nice? Like the friend was like,
Well,
I can't do the work.
Very much needed if he was willing to do that.
This worked out well for everyone. Kirk felt Daniel was a good worker and his cost was reasonable. Dennis and Ernie even got to the point where they would actually allow Daniel to stay at their house in exchange for his help. Eventually, though, the older couple didn't want the burden of their handyman living in their home, and tensions grew. That was why Dennis was at Kirk's house. He was asking for help. He claimed Daniel had pushed him down and he wanted him out of his house and to talk to the police about the assault. But this was a Sunday evening and the local police station was closed.
Oh, dear. What? Well, how small is this town?
I mean, pretty small. I'm sure you could still call 911, but like going in to file a report.
Right.
Yeah. So Kirk promised to take Dennis to the station in the morning. But Dennis wouldn't make it to his friend's house or to the police station. Meanwhile, Ernie was at his new home and was anxiously awaiting a visit from his husband, but he didn't show. After 2 weeks, Ernie was able to get the employees to contact the police and they went to the couple's home for a welfare check, but there was no answer.
Do we know how often he would visit?
It made it sound like he hadn't even visited yet because he was
just
transferring and getting in.
2 weeks seems like a very long time.
It does. So there wasn't anything saying he hadn't, so I'm not sure if he was visiting every other day and then maybe he missed a day or two, or if in those 2 weeks he hadn't shown. But it sounded like the amount of time in which he was expected to be there, he hadn't gone. Ernie was able to get the employees to contact the police and they went by the couple's home for a welfare check and Daniel answered. When asked about Dennis, Dennis said he would be out of town to go visit people, but he wasn't sure who or where or for how long.
That's suspicious.
That's a red flag is what that is.
Yeah, it sure is.
Ernie did tell the police that Dennis had mentioned he might get out of town for a few days, but you'll have to remember that Ernie also has memory health issues. So Dennis was surely needing a rest after the trauma of watching his husband being rushed to the hospital and now put into a home. But again, he didn't say where he was going or how long he'd be there. And side note, hey, everyone listening, please tell people. It's not that hard. Shoot a text message of where you're going and when you should be expected back, even if it's like a day hike. It's not that hard.
It is a kind of habit you have to force yourself into.
That's true.
We have a friend who I'm not going to name names. They did a first date with a stranger on a hike that was 8 miles long. It was an all-day date, and when they got there, they realized this is a person they did not want to spend all day with.
Yeah, that's a horrible date idea.
But
that's
none
a
of
horrible
us
way
knew
to meet
where
someone.
this person
yeah,
was.
And you're just out in the woods.
Or,
that's stupid.
what I do is I have 2 people that I'm constantly sharing my location with. So as long as I tell them I'm doing something, they know where I am.
So we have a roommate and she goes hiking and I go to text her anytime she goes and I'll just say, hey, where'd you end up? Because she usually doesn't know ahead of time.
Right.
And then she'll just say, this hike for half the day. I should be home around whatever time.
Yeah, that's smart. Smart stuff, guys.
We've all watched I Survived. We know. Just leave the note.
Maybe somebody wants to be on the show.
There are easier shows to get on.
I want to be a reality TV star, so I think I'm going to be on I Survived. So I'm going to go swim in the shark-infested water.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't be alive. I don't know. 12 days since Dennis went by Kirk's house and 10 days since the first welfare check, police returned to the home. It isn't clear if they just knocked or what all they did, but again, there was no sign of Dennis. Now there was a real concern. Dennis may be one to leave the house or leave town for even a few days, but he wasn't one to abandon his husband, their pets, or their house. That's when an APB was put out for Dennis's car. The day before the APB went out, and 130 miles away in Coos County, Dennis's 1996 Ford Escort was found in the possession of a woman from Medford, Lori DeClusen. She claimed to be borrowing the car from her friend Dennis, but police soon learned her actual friend in this scenario was Daniel.
I figured it might be.
How'd you do that, you little detective?
Reasoning.
This took Dennis's disappearance from suspicious to frightening. Police informed Ernie that Dennis's car had been recovered, so they officially listed Dennis Day as missing. Sadly, because of Ernie's memory issues, he was unable to provide basic information about his husband or their friends and family.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Police followed what trails they could. They questioned Daniel. He reiterated what Ernie had shared, that Dennis said he was going to leave for a few days. While that seemed like the only logical answer at that point, close friends found it hard to believe that their friend, who had become nearly a hermit and he hardly left his house, would be gone for more than a day or two, if at all. Police even reached out to any and all friends and family they could find or that Ernie could provide, but again, his health made that nearly impossible. No one that the police contacted had heard from Dennis or had made plans to see him. The detectives involved continued to examine the recovered vehicle and Dennis's home. There were no clues, no signs of foul play. Searching the house, the police were up against a challenge, investigating a house that was small, crowded, and not being cared for. While they didn't say specifically, it has been implied that Dennis and Ernie were hoarders, or, as my training has taught me, acquirers to a certain degree.
Wait, is that the PC term?
It's it's not so much a PC, but like hoarding is negative, and so as a level 3 hoarder, I will admit.
How many levels are there?
9. It's more like the negative connotation to it, and so you aren't hoarding it away; you're acquiring things. And it was a really cool training because I went for the population I was working with because I had like level 20 hoarders. But it was really interesting how they talked about the mindset of it. And it's like, it's usually creative people because they see something, they don't want to throw it away because they see a use for it that maybe someone else doesn't. Or you feel a responsibility to keep things out of the landfill and whatever. I went for work and then I'm sitting there like, yes, this is me. You're speaking to me. Thank you.
Did they mention anything about the correlation between acquiring and animals inside like that?
I don't remember.
Pretty common.
Yeah, I don't remember specifically, but yeah, I think they did go into that. I'll try to find it. It was really fascinating. I mean, even if I didn't acquire things, it was so intriguing because I always thought it came from like a trauma and then you like snap or whatever and you start doing it. And it's like so different from that. It's really intriguing.
My grandmother's neighbor across the street was like that. And my mom never let me eat anything from there.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't understand because as a kid, I didn't know she was different.
Right. Their acquiring could have led to the house not being the easiest thing to search, although they did search the house at least 3 different times, hoping to find any sign as to where Dennis would have gone. During the searches, they went through the couple's drawers, cabinets, freezer, and even went through their crawl space. The weeks of searching and following leads soon turned into months. Then word spread to those that had worked with Dennis through the years, and a Facebook group was started. A beloved friend, performer, husband, and Mouseketeer had vanished, and his friends were desperate to do anything they could to help. Calls were made, banners were created. It took some time, but thankfully, because of Dennis's Mickey Mouse Club history, attention was brought to his story, making local, national, and international news. Where was the missing Mouseketeer? While his disappearance was worrisome enough, the months were going by and summer was turning into a cold winter. Wherever he was and whomever he was with, the elements were going to get worse. With only a few police on the squad, the Phoenix police reached out for help after 5 months of no leads. They were given 2 detectives to work on the case, one from Oregon State Police and the other from local Jackson County Sheriff's Office. As time went on, the case got more and more attention. It was helpful and appreciated that the Facebook groups grew and that the case was covered on most major news outlets and even got Dateline coverage, but it wasn't helping with results. Dennis's family was frustrated with the lack of answers, so they started a GoFundMe so they could hire a private detective, but nothing came of it. From as early as 3 weeks into the investigation, there had been reports from neighbors and calls to 911 made that there was a foul odor coming from the house.
Uh-oh.
One of the calls even came from the Meals on Wheels volunteer that was delivering their food. While officers didn't go to the house after each call, they did go to the house for investigative searches, during each of which there was no overwhelmingly concerning smell, although there were reports of the urine and excrement throughout the house obviously causing a smell, so it's kind of
probably
assumed,
wrote it off to
yeah,
that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Bad smell's a bad smell,
Yep.
am I right?
Finally, in April of 2019, 10 months after Dennis was last seen, officers took a canine unit to the house in hopes of finding some sort of lead. After 3 unsuccessful searches, they finally got a hit on something, and it was much more than a clue. The dog had signaled at something under a pile of clothing. Sadly, what the dog had discovered was Dennis's decomposing body.
Under a pile of clothing in the house? How was that missed?
A body that, according to a Day family lawyer, had been stepped on and walked across while concealed beneath the clothing multiple times by police officers.
God. It must have been a large acquirement of things in that room, but to not even move where you're walking?
Or go, here's a big pile. I wonder if he fell since he was older and maybe ended up under here or something.
That's horrific.
If you're pulling drawers open and finding a freezer to check and a crawl space,
you can't be bothered to
you can't move the floor around. Yeah. They had actually stepped on his remains so much they had caused skeletal fractures. It took a month for the remains to be confirmed as Dennis because DNA and dental records could not be used due to his body's condition. The investigation had changed from a missing person to homicide due to the body being hidden under the clothes. But who would have wanted to kill the 76-year-old man? Once the focus shifted from the where to the who, some disturbing information came to surface.
Oh, no.
It turned out that Dennis had in fact called the police before his disappearance. Back in July of 2018, Dennis reported to the police that his live-in handyman, Daniel Bruda, had behaved violently towards him. The responding officer's solution? That he, Dennis, would need to start the formal eviction process against Daniel because he's a tenant.
Please tell me someone sued this police department.
Ooh, I wonder if they did. At the start of the searches and investigation, when Dennis was still missing, the police spoke with Daniel at the house on 2 different occasions. On the body cam footage of the interview closest to when he went missing, it's obvious that Daniel has injuries and wounds to his hands and arms that were consistent with an altercation.
Oh, boy.
With Dennis being found dead, his car being in possession of a strange woman that was friends with Daniel was now much more concerning. So, in June of 2019, Daniel and the woman found in Dennis and Ernie's car, Lori DeClusen, and another woman, Wanda Garcia, were all arrested. Lori for unauthorized use of a vehicle for which she was indicted by a grand jury, and Wanda for car theft and for stealing and selling a brooch that was taken from the house. With Daniel's arrest, the 36-year-old's extensive legal history came to light. He had a decade-long arrest and prison record, including serving time for sodomy, robbery, and assault.
Oh, my goodness.
He also started using meth a year before Dennis's death.
A recipe for a bad time.
Once arrested, Daniel was charged with manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and identity theft. There's also evidence of him using Dennis's debit card to make multiple purchases after Dennis went missing, so illegal credit card use is also a component. Under arrest, Daniel opened up to police about what had happened between him and Dennis. Daniel claimed that while he had only been living with Dennis and Ernie for a couple months, Dennis wanted him out of the house. They had frequent arguments about it, and tensions were high. Once Ernie went into assisted living, things only got worse. Then, 2 weeks after Ernie left, things became really heated. Dennis and Daniel's argument became physical when Daniel pushed Dennis to the ground. It's unclear if he died from the fall or was injured, but to literally cover up his crime, Daniel just hid Dennis's body, perhaps while he was still alive, under the pile of clothes in the house's living room.
And I'm guessing we're not going to know because the body was so crushed. They
Well,
wouldn't be
aren't
able to
you a
see
little
that.
scientist? Do you want to just do this case?
Let me just jump in here, guys. I don't know the case, but I can finish it.
Can we go watch a legal thriller together and you can just spoil the whole thing?
I do that frequently. I
know.
apologize.
That's the fun of it. There are a few other reasons the cause of death isn't known, as Emily just spoiled.
Sorry.
Daniel admitted that the smell of death started to take over the home, so he used different chemicals to help with that. Those chemicals may have destroyed evidence. Additionally, after having the police step on the pile of clothes and damage Dennis's skeleton, the medical examiner was unable to say what injuries were from Daniel and what came from the weight of being stepped on. So, for those reasons, they don't know the cause of death.
That's hard. I mean, so sometimes you can tell just because as you're, not to just like step in and be a scientist, but as your kind of the moisture leaves your bones and things, you can tell when something was perimortem, postmortem. But if it's been just, as I can imagine, totally trampled, that they can't even tell that.
Right.
That's just
well, and then
sad.
it makes you wonder where it's like, okay, was he still alive? And did he could have bled internally from the fall? He could have had
I
a
certainly
head
hope
injury.
he died quickly.
Me too. I hope that he
hit his
fell
head right
and bonked
then.
his head, and that was it.
Wow, that is just so
But
depressing.
but obviously it also wasn't that severe because he didn't have like a cracked skull or knife wounds. You know, the medical examiner didn't say anything like that, you know, so it's not obvious. For now, justice remains at a standstill. After the arrest, Daniel Bruto was found unfit to stand trial due to a mental health condition that remains in his sealed documents. It was clear to the doctors that worked with him that Daniel was unaware of how serious his actions were or how serious the charges were. This was at the end of 2019, so while he will be reevaluated every few months, for now he is getting proper treatment in the Oregon State Mental Hospital. Once he is found fit, he will go to trial. But there have obviously been some holdups, as there was a little thing called COVID that threw off trial schedules. The same goes for the two women involved. Declusion was supposed to appear in court back in September of 2019, and Garcia was appearing in November. I was unable to find updates on either woman, but we will definitely let you know if we hear something. Although if you do know Lori Declusion, she does have a warrant out for her arrest because she didn't show up to that trial in September.
Oh, boy.
When it came to Dennis's family, they have filed a nearly $2 million lawsuit against the Phoenix police.
Thank you, family.
They argue that they can't understand how police can search a house multiple times and not find a body, how complaints of smells from neighbors didn't alarm the officers whose station was only 2 blocks away from the house, and they didn't understand how on earth they could go into a home with a smell of death and step on the remains of their loved one. The police argue that they never restricted the family's access to the house. Like, you can't sue us for being bad at our job.
So it's their fault that they didn't find the body?
Yeah, like, hey,
boy.
you could have come to the house yourself. It's that kind of thing.
No,
like,
you're the ones who are professionals that are supposed to know how to care for a crime scene.
And who says if they're even close? Like, are they even drivable distance? Like, that's not my problem.
Oh, that really chaps my ass. I'll tell you what.
But even that isn't accurate, as the family claims that 6 weeks before Dennis's body was discovered, the police made a strong suggestion that they didn't bother coming down because it's just going to muddle the investigation.
Okay.
You have thoughts, I feel?
Yes, I do. So this friend that introduced them to Daniel, if he's got so many mental issues and it's so obvious, how did he not pick up on something off about him?
It sounded like he was just the handyman. Like just kind of
maybe he never spent a long period of
yeah,
time
I
with
think
him.
it sounded very casual with them. So I think they just crossed paths and he's like, I'm a handyman if you ever need work. And so he maybe just had him every once in a while.
Unfortunate he lived there because.
Exactly. So it's like from what I read, it sounded like it was a very casual acquaintance. And so then he's like, oh, yeah. I mean, most people do that with that type of contractor worker where it's like, oh, I got a cabinet guy. Oh, I got a plumber guy. And you don't really know them, but it's, oh, they did good work.
And let me just think out loud here for a second in defense of the police for a moment. It's a missing persons case. They're likely not combing through a home like they would on a homicide scene, right? So if we know a crime was committed in the home, they probably would have taken everything out. So they were likely only moving what they had to and looking for anything that could possibly tell them where he's been or where he went.
Right.
But I'm having a really hard time with that because I would expect that they're not going to step on someone's belongings. They should have at least moved where they're going to walk.
You know, something that stuck with me, I watched the Golden State Killer documentary on Netflix, and something I had never thought about. It was a woman, I don't remember her name or her victim number, so I'm sorry about that. But it was her and her husband talking about how they had to move because the house was just like ruined now. They couldn't be there after the memories. And I had never thought of it. They were like, it looked like a smoke bomb had gone off because of all the fingerprinting.
Oh, yeah.
That they had gone through and just left it. And it's like, oh, yeah, they go through and search stuff. They don't care.
They don't clean up after themselves. So that's why they're those third parties for crime scene cleanup, and they'll come in and do it. But it's not automatic.
But it is where it's just like, but if you're searching, you just kind of think, okay, if you see a pile of something, how are you not just scooting stuff around just to be like, I'm searching? What are you going to find in a drawer? A note of where I went to go see my family and I hid it in my sock drawer. So you're not going to find a note and you're not going to find his body. Why are you looking in drawers? You're dealing with an older person that maybe fell or was hurt by someone. And by then they know that he had reported.
Good point. If someone's missing and their home looks like a disaster area, wouldn't you maybe look for someone who had fallen?
Very common for people that have that kind of home. It's very common.
It is. Yeah, I've heard several cases where somebody wasn't found for a very long time because they just lived in what we would think looks like a garbage dump. You know?
Yeah, so it's
maybe we need to implement protocol for these types of homes.
Oh,
you know,
yeah. I wonder if they even have that. And it makes me think too. You know, it's like I've been in a room where someone has died and been for a few weeks, and it does stay. And there was other stuff there. There was fecal matter and stuff.
It reeks.
Yeah, and you can smell all that, but there is a difference in the death smell. And you would think these cops being trained could maybe tell the difference between dog pee and a 9-month.
And I don't know if there's probably no budget for this considering the dogs are $10,000 a pop, but having a dog for missing person just in general could be helpful for looking for those types of smells.
Yeah. And then you look and go, okay, they did have to reach out because they didn't even have detectives. So they had to reach out to get more help. So maybe they've just never dealt with anything like this, where, again, you don't want to be like, okay, sue them for all their money. But it's also like, well, yeah, that's your job.
That's a good point. These small towns, some of them have never even handled a homicide before. We've come across a lot of cases like that where they need to send someone from the state police to help out because none of them they might be trained on it, but they've never actually put it into practice.
Yeah.
So I guess I can understand to an extent, but when you hear someone's loved one's body was trampled on,
and it all was kind of there. I mean, it even before it came to light about Daniel and all this stuff, it's like, the neighbor connected them with Daniel. Daniel was the last person to see him. Let me run Daniel's background. Oh, we do have some issues here. Let's maybe bring him in.
Well, an elderly person, their car was found. That to me automatically goes from a missing person to a homicide.
Oh, yeah.
Like I would have, at that point, turned it. I'm not a detective or anything.
Well, maybe you should be. Did you hear yourself this episode? My goodness.
When I read these types of cases, there's always that pivotal moment where it's like, yep, it's a homicide.
Yeah.
In a case I'm working on, or I did for TikTok recently, there was one of those moments as well where it was like, yep, it's been weeks. We're pretty certain she's dead now.
Right.
that changes how you approach the property.
Mhm.
That's when they should have done everything.
Well, and also it's like, you know, why did it take a dog a few minutes? I get that the dog's trained for it, but why?
I'm thinking the house was
You-
much worse than
You were
we
working on it
envisioning.
for 9 months and not coming across it. Like it just blows your mind. It's like, wouldn't things have moved? Wouldn't there be spots? I mean, I
feel like
I
anybody,
follow all those pages on Instagram.
So do I.
The crime scene cleanup.
I think anybody would recognize the smell of human decay. It is a very different smell.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's horrible because obviously this was like a perfect storm of everything going wrong. Like Ernie happened to have left and gone to the hospital and then was out of the house.
Yeah.
And then Dennis was left on his own and then his car was gone. So people were like, oh, did he drive here? Did he drive to my house? And then
a storm of questionable activity is what that is. Like
and that's my true crime novel coming out. Thank you. Trademarked.
Oh my God. That's so sad.
As for Ernie Caswell, he is still at the assisted living facility. His memory continues to fade, but he can still recall when he met the love of his life, Dennis Day, at the Christmas play. When we think of mistreatment, we usually think of race or gender, but ageism is real and prolific. Would someone have done more if Dennis had been younger when he called to report the violence he was experiencing? Maybe. Would he have been so vulnerable to people like Daniel Bruda? Probably not. While there aren't exact numbers, as it is believed crimes against seniors are majorly underreported, those that are 65 and older are more susceptible to certain crimes. Physical abuse can occur in care facilities and with in-home caregivers. Now with the internet, there are phone and email scams that can decimate someone's financial security. You know, scams done like garbage scum people like Jen Shaw from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Don't even get me started on her.
Oh boy. Here we go.
I said, I'm not getting started. There are many reasons seniors can become easier targets to those that wish to rip them off or harm them, and many reasons that those incidents aren't reported, such as embarrassment or confusion. But there are things we can do to help. Number 1, talk to the older folks in your life. Don't discount them. Stay in contact, and if they mention something that seems wrong or off, try to dive into it. Don't let them try to deal with Nigerian princes on their own. Another is a senior phone line. In Oregon, we have linesforlife.org, a phone line that provides support for seniors that may just need someone to talk to or help with issues like this. So if you're in Oregon, make sure your elder loved ones have this number, 800-273-8255. If you would like to volunteer to take calls, you can do so by emailing Bill at billf@linesforlife.org.
One of the most horrific things that I recall from my childhood was watching a 2020 on elder abuse.
Oh,
It really opened my eyes to something that I never in a million years would have thought of. But a woman was getting complaints from her mother and put in a camera and just saw some horrific things. And then other people around the country were doing this. I mean, horrible things like a man had a brain surgery and his caretaker was hitting him in the head right after. So just...
Oh, I think I remember that now. That sounds really familiar.
Scars me big time. But I think there was a lot of people that just didn't talk about it. So you didn't really realize it was so prevalent. And it's a scary thing, especially if you can't support your elders in your family and don't have the room or the money to have them in your own home. It's a scary world putting them in facilities. So it's really important that you research them.
Yeah, I think people don't realize how vulnerable of a population older people are because it's like, oh, they're adults or they can do that on their own. But when I think of a vulnerable population, it's little kids, people with special needs, and the elderly. Because it's who are they going to tell or are they going to be believed? And they are in those situations where it is like little kids where maybe you're dealing with bathrooming or you're dealing with behaviors or you're dealing, it could be just like dealing with those same stressors.
And we have a friend in the industry of care facilities, and they mentioned there are seniors who have memory issues and they may act out and tell stories that aren't necessarily true. So then that's like, okay, then the caretakers are just assuming everyone's like that. Are they really hearing what's being said?
Right.
So it's a It's a hard one right there, but pay attention and listen to your elders for sure. Oh, that's a doozy, Alisha.
You're welcome. I have one more paragraph. Dennis Day spent his life entertaining and bringing joy to others. Those that loved him are working to continue his legacy as an entertainer and lover of the arts. He deserved so much more than what happened to him and deserves to be known for something more than the body that was carelessly stepped over and discarded.
Using Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat.
I don't have OnlyFans, but I do have a Snapchat.
He suggested that they meet at the Wild Horse Resort and Casino in Casino. He suggested they meet at the Wild Horse Resort in... Oh, my God.
Casino.
It's very distracting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was silent.
Like someone putting an earbud up their nose hole.
One time.
One time. That was a good fart sound.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I've been working on it.
Thank you. And then that'll be...
Oh, I was expecting you to sing it.
No. M-I-C-K-Y.
Oh, dear.
Do you want me to give you a Jessica Simpson version?
I absolutely do not. And I don't know why she has come up several times this week.
S-E.
Oh, she's like, I have something serious to tell you. And it was, how did she become famous? I love Renaissance fairs.
Nerd.
It's a little tidbit about Emily that a lot of people don't know.
Have you've like been to Renaissance fairs?
Girl. So my brother might be cool now, but when he was a kid, all he wanted all year was that Renaissance fair, and he would save up his money, and he would buy his dragon and his swords.
Oh, that's
He spent
cute.
$56 on a dragon with like a ball it was guarding, and I still make fun of him today.
That's
Shout
amazing.
out to Graham.
Hey, Graham. And they went by the couple's home for a
werewolf
check. Ow. Excuse me. During
M.I.C.I.D.E.
Murder in the Rain is a Cascade Media production, written and hosted by Emily Rowney, Alisha Holland, and Josh McCullough, edited by Josh McCullough. You can always contact us at murderintherain@gmail.com or through our website, murderintherain.com. If you just can't get enough of Murder in the Rain, for as little as $5 a month, you'll have exclusive access to bonus episodes at patreon.com. You can find us on all of the socials, and for more true crime, follow @M_Murder in the Rain on TikTok, and you can also listen to Alisha and Josh on their other show, Always Be My Sisters. And suck my balls.